Imagine walking along a desolate shoreline under a suffocating, apocalyptic sky, only to find this. A colossal, disembodied human head, washed up on the sand like the corpse of a titan. The forehead is violently peeled back, the skin hanging loose like a discarded rind. Inside the exposed cranial cavity, a miniature man sits quietly before a canvas, actively painting. He remains entirely undisturbed by the sheer, unadulterated terror locked onto the colossal face he occupies. The irises appear vacant, while the massive eyes bulge wildly from their sockets, projecting an expression of deranged madness. The face stares fixedly as a horde of small, fantastical hybrid creatures crawls out of its own cavernous, gaping mouth. Executed around 1650 by the Flemish master Joos van Craesbeeck, this masterpiece forces the viewer into a highly specific psychological trap. The entities infesting this desolate shoreline serve as explicitly defined evil thoughts given physical form. Craesbeeck illustrates the absolute terror of a mind eating itself alive, overwhelmed by neurosis and hallucination. To comprehend how a mid-17th century artist constructed such a profound architecture of horror, we must examine the squalid, terrifying details breeding in the sand. Joos van Craesbeeck possessed a deeply unconventional background for an artist tackling the grand theological weight of Christian monasticism. Born in Neerlinter to a baker, he initially followed his family's trade, working within the heavily fortified Antwerp citadel. Inside this military fortress, he encountered the notoriously dissolute genre painter Adrian Brouwer, who was temporarily imprisoned there. Brouwer specialized in visceral depictions of lower-class tavern life, extreme intoxication, and brutish human emotion. Craesbeeck became Brouwer's devoted pupil, mastering the gritty, squalid realism of the Flemish tavern. He developed a profound expertise in the tronie, a specialized form of painting dedicated to capturing exaggerated facial expressions and intense emotional states. This highly specific pedigree functions as the hermeneutic key to deciphering the colossal head dominating a third of the canvas. Craesbeeck weaponizes his mastery of the tronie to ground supernatural horrors in flesh, blood, and recognizable human folly. The warm, ochre-brown skin of the giant face features careful academic modeling, creating a startling realism despite its impossible scale. Firmly embedded in the sand, the head acts as a grotesque architectural element. Art historical consensus suggests this deeply terrified face operates as a distorted self-portrait of Craesbeeck himself, or perhaps a personification of St. Anthony's own younger, worldly self. Placing a vulnerable human face as the focal point of the composition executes a radical psychological shift from his medieval predecessors. The threat originates strictly from within. The presence of the tiny painter inside the brain space acts as a profound meta-artistic commentary. The artist's own imagination acts as the actual forge of these nightmares, wrestling with the same psychological demons plaguing the saint. The top of the giant head functions as a macabre platform heavily burdened by a bizarre accumulation of symbolic objects. Resting just above the gaping forehead gash sits a pair of pince-nez spectacles, accompanied by an extinguished candle. In 17th century Flemish iconography, optical instruments operated as highly ambivalent symbols. The extinguished candle beside it reinforces this dread, serving as a classic memento mori. Directly behind these objects, a large bird's nest rests heavily on the skull, containing a pair of geese, several hatching eggs, and small birds fluttering nearby. This serves as a direct, unmistakable reference to contemporary Flemish proverbs. Possessing a bird's nest in one's head was an idiom synonymous with madness, folly, and intellectual vacuity. Waterbirds like geese were deeply associated with laziness, gossip, and unclean spirits.
Having them nest directly on the vessel of the mind proves that distracting, low-level worldly concerns have taken permanent root and are actively breeding inside the subject's head.
The consequences of this internal corruption flow downward to the screaming mouth. The lips are parted wide enough to serve as a cavernous hellmouth, painted as a dark tunnel. Tiny armored soldiers and mutated hybrids literally tumble from this void onto the shoreline, and vice versa. The spoken word, the breath, and the unchecked thoughts of the corrupted mind birth actual, physical evil into the world. And that world is already violently under siege from the dark waters beyond. A deep grey, stormy sky dominates the upper canvas, its brooding clouds projecting an apocalyptic atmosphere. The dim, dramatic lighting is a typical Northern Baroque device utilised to create immense moral weight. Craesbeeck departs significantly from the relatively flat, panoramic and evenly lit vistas found in the earlier works of Hieronymus Bosch. Instead, he employs a sophisticated, theatrical Baroque chiaroscuro. A harsh, localized light forces the viewer's eye through a specific narrative sequence, exposing the grotesque forms emerging from the shadows. A dark sea, stretching endlessly into the distance. In biblical literature and medieval Christian exegesis, the sea is frequently associated with primordial chaos, the dwelling place of the Leviathan and the turbulent, uncontrollable depths of the human unconscious. This aquatic void literally washes up a flock of evil spirits, pressing relentlessly inward toward the shore. A massive armada of demonic, fantastical beings navigates the water in bizarre vessels. Military flags and banners pierce the dim light, confirming a coordinated, hellish invasion. The individual figures are chaotic, hybrid abominations featuring human bodies merged with the faces of pigs, reptiles, and geese. They advance in unending waves, visually manifesting the overwhelming and continuous nature of temptation. As the deep water gives way to the shallow edge directly in front of the giant face, the invasion physically alters the terrestrial earth. Floating in these shallows is a large barrel, upon which a semi-nude hybrid figure sits prominently, bearing devil horns and a tail. Demonic imps and grotesque creatures claw their way through the surf, trying to climb their way into the gaping mouth. A creature with a pig's head and a red devil's tail sits bare in a small boat alongside a giant fish. With every wave, the turbulent depths vomit another manifestation of spiritual dread onto the sand, ensuring the assault remains continuous and suffocating. Directly in front of the cavernous hellmouth, the chaos crystallizes into perverse, mocking vignettes. A wooden slab forms a makeshift bridge leading to a crowded boat. Walking across this plank is a mother goose, delicately holding hands with a tiny goose chick that is still partially encased within its eggshell. They are being led into a vessel teeming with nude, horned human figures and incredibly grotesque, colorful demon hybrids. The innocence of the nursery is weaponized, inverted into a macabre procession of the damned. Moving toward the bottom center of the composition, Craesbeeck places the fractured shell of a massive egg. Out of this stark white shell, an array of snakes slither into the open. Snakes remain the universal Christian symbol for deception. The devil has corrupted a universal symbol of life into a nursery of venom. The immediate foreground functions as a densely populated bestiary of sensory overload. A large red arthropod, resembling a vividly colored giant crab, sits prominently with its legs spread wide, acting as a demonic presence. Further amplifying the chaos, a helmet-wearing man with claws for feet marches aggressively, carrying a knife nearly equal to his own height. Among these Boschian horrors, Craesbeeck introduces a masterclass in Baroque surrealism. A grotesque portmanteau creature, a duck-horse hybrid, stands ready as a mount. The unnatural blending of water and earth species symbolizes a demonic subversion of taxonomy, creating an abomination defying rational categorization. Sitting upon this monstrous steed is a bare man, deliberately riding backwards, playing a lute. Riding backwards on a beast was a common medieval trope, representing the total reversal of moral order and complete capitulation to absurdity. Atop the musician's head rests an inverted funnel. This specific device, popularized by Hieronymus Bosch, transforms a practical tool meant to channel liquid into a symbol of absolute uselessness. Wearing it signifies madness, charlatanism, the spilling away of true wisdom, and the outright rejection of divine grace. The entire shoreline is constructed to break the human spirit through a highly structured taxonomy of psychological failure. Every crawling demon and mutated animal is explicitly designed to fracture the resolve of the single, marginalized figure attempting to survive the assault. Nestled deep in the lower right quadrant of the canvas is the titular protagonist, Saint Anthony. Despite being the subject, he is deliberately marginalized, pushed to the far edge and dwarfed by the massive scale of the giant head and the chaotic density of the horde. This compositional choice emphasizes the suffocating weight of the temptations he faces. He is a small bastion of faith, besieged by an ocean of madness. The elderly bearded man wears the rough brown habit of a hermit monk. He crouches beneath a dead, gnarled tree, emphasizing his absolute withdrawal from civilization. Positioned forcefully before him is a woman, elegantly and luxuriously dressed. She wears a white blouse with a teal skirt, colors firmly associated with earthly beauty and worldly wealth. She represents the succubus, sent explicitly to break the monk's vow of chastity. The foundational Life of Antony details how the devil utilized intensely vivid visions of seductive women to tempt him with the sins of the flesh. Her posture is forward, pressing and seductive. She extends a goblet toward him, an offer of earthly intoxication and a classic motif representing sensual pleasure and corruption. Antony's face is deeply lined. His expression betrays a profound struggle. His eyes slide sideways toward the temptress, visibly burdened by the proximity of her offer. Yet, he does not fight with physical weapons. He clutches an open book tightly in his hands. The Holy Scriptures act as his impenetrable intellectual and spiritual barrier against the sensory overload attempting to breach his mind. It is a silent war of attrition. A small parchment attached to the dead tree trunk beside him displays a crucifix, reinforcing his eremitic shelter. He remains a small bastion of faith, besieged by an ocean of madness. Craesbeeck firmly internalizes the demonic. The monsters arriving by the sea and the corruptions slithering from the broken egg are undeniably horrific, representing the complete degradation of the human spirit into animalistic vice. The true terror lies in the realization that hell operates as a terrifying psychological state. St. Anthony's victory serves as a profound triumph over the terrifying, generative power of the corrupted human imagination. By the way, if you'd like a museum-quality reproduction of this painting, you can find it over at our store, viewcrypt.com. The link is in the pinned comment below. See you in the next one.